Hello my darlings, welcome or welcome back to my channel. This is Reads with Lauren. I am Lauren and it's so wonderful to have you here with me today. I am a little under the weather at the moment, but the show must go on. So I thought that I would pop up a little video wrapping up the books that I read in January. Now, I read 16 books in January, which isn't as big as some other months, especially last year, but it's a pretty steady flow of books, I think. I'm attempting to step away from reading too many graphic novels because I want my numbers to be a lot more of the books that I really enjoy and I get a lot out of. So I'm trying to head back into reading mostly novels. So the numbers have dropped quite significantly, but that is totally fine in my book. So let's go through them. So the first book I want to talk about is the first book that I read in January, and that is Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. This is a horror based around mermaids. I did not expect to enjoy this as much as I did. And several years ago, a production company sent a team out to this secluded area in the ocean, and the only thing that came back was footage showing all of these people being brutally unalived by mermaids. So this footage is then leaked out to the public and they explain that it is not real, but they have decided to finance the next trip out with a group of people who are scientists and who they are hoping will be able to find and bring back one of these mermaids. Obviously, what ensues, because it's a horror, is something very similar to the first group of people. But this was a lot of fun. I actually really enjoyed this. There were a lot of characters on board that you got to spend a bit of time with and learn about. Some of them were utterly terrifying, whilst others you could sort of relate to. There is some queer rep in this book, which is great. And there are many scenes that are utterly terrifying. My anxiety levels spiked, particularly one in the end regarding the pool. If you know, you know. But I really enjoyed this one and I gave it 3.5 stars. The next book that I finished in January was The Glitch by Leanne Slade. Now I listened to this one in audio and I ended up listening to this in just one sitting. The audio narration was great. The actress from Normal People and the actor from Daisy Jones and the Six narrated this audiobook. Having the different narrators was really great. I love audiobooks narrated by two people, particularly in the romance genre, because I have to say I really struggle listening to spicy scenes when the narrator is trying to narrate the other person's perspective, especially if they have to put on a voice for that. I really struggle with that. I really enjoyed this one. This one centered around Grace, and Grace has just had to close down her business. It is the day before her 30th birthday. She's miserable. She's missing her ex. Everything's kind of falling apart. But she ends up waking up the next day and it turns out she's gone back 5 years. So it's her 25th birthday. She's just about to meet her ex again. And I loved this one because it really centered on what changes you could make and sort of the butterfly effect of that, but also things that don't necessarily change. And I really found it to be a great read. There is a small twist at the end. I did pick half of it, but not the other half, if that makes sense. If you've read it, you might understand what I mean. But I really enjoyed this. So if you're into sci-fi and romance with time travel elements, particularly like myself, then this is one that I highly recommend. I gave this one 4 stars. Next, I read The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. This one was brilliant. Yet again, Maggie O'Farrell has succeeded exponentially. I will read all of her books. She is definitely quickly becoming one of the people that I listen out for and add to my TBR whenever I discover something new of hers. This one was set in Italy in the 1650s, loosely based on historical events that happened between the daughter of the Duke of Tuscany, who was promised to be wed to the Duke of Ferrara. And at the very start of this, you jump in and Lucrezia is basically freaking out about the prospect that her husband is trying to kill her. And it jumps back and forth in time. And as it goes along, you kind of piece together why she's feeling this way and what ends up happening. There is quite a big age gap between the characters. I believe she is aged up in the group to not be wed to him until 15. However, there is potentially triggering scenes, quite obviously, with that age gap and the forced marriage that may make you uncomfortable. This really portrayed a Jekyll and Hyde character in a really great way and beautifully wrote the disasters of men in power. But I was shocked by the ending. I didn't expect it, and I am grateful for it, I have to say. I really love this. Maggie O'Farrell has quickly become an author that I thoroughly enjoy. So this one I also gave 4 stars. The next book that I read was 14 Days. This was edited by Margaret Atwood and Douglas Preston. However, there are over 30 authors that have combined their talents to bring this story together. So it's sort of a short story collection, but it's combined to create one full story. And even though the concept was amazing, it is based during lockdown in COVID times, and these people in this building are coming together on the top of the roof to talk about their lives and share their stories. But this one kind of felt a little bit like too many cooks spoiled the broth for me personally. Didn't expect the twist at the end, but it was really probably the only way that they could have justified the stories and the way that it went. So I gave this one 2 stars. It definitely wasn't my favorite, which was a bit disappointing, especially considering it was one that I was really excited to get my teeth into. But I'm glad that I did read it, and if you are interested, I definitely think it's worth a read. It's just a couple of the stories get a little bit out there, and I was kind of like, how will they wrap this up? I don't understand. But it was interesting. It was definitely interesting. The next book that I read was Gotta Get Through This by Louis Theroux. This was on my radar for a very long time. It was in a few TBRs before I finally got around to it, and I'm glad that I did. I love Louis Theroux. I have always enjoyed his documentaries, and it was interesting getting a little bit more insight behind a lot of the documentaries. There wasn't as much information as I would have liked. He definitely delved a lot further into the sort of Jimmy Savile stuff that was going on at the time that he released this book. So it definitely was more of a focus on his relationship with him and the processing that he went through when all of the terrible things were discovered. But it also briefly touches on a couple of the other documentaries and very small snippets of life growing up and life in relationships and his children. So this was a lot of fun. I generally can find memoirs to be a little bit hard to get through, but I found this one really easy. It's definitely in Louis' style, and I really did appreciate it. I'm glad I've read it, and I gave this one 3.5 stars. Then I read Hello Beautiful by Anne Napolitano. This was not at all what I expected, but it was really thoroughly good. So the synopsis basically tells us about Will, and it's based on Will and Julia, and they meet in college and they decide to get married, and it explores their relationship and, you know, the impact that our family and our childhood can have on relationships. Going into that, that's what I knew, and it went off on a complete tangent that I did not expect. However, I thought that it was very clever and well done. I think that it was a really great portrayal of, you know, how relationships can break and mend, and I really loved that it kind of spanned over quite a few years, and you got to see the family developments and the family conflicts and how they continued. I definitely think that this family made a lot of very silly decisions that I personally wouldn't have made myself, but I found it really interesting to see how they all came together at the end. There were definitely questionable moments. It definitely tackled a lot of morals and delved into those a little bit, but also kind of brushed them off in a way. It did kind of cut off at the end quite abruptly, and I would have liked a little bit more story, especially with the ending storyline. But overall, I did enjoy this read and I gave it 4 stars. Then I picked up A Blind Date with a Book. I do delve into this in another video. I have recently also recorded a whole video, but this was A Blind Date with a Book. I had no idea what I was going into. All I knew was that it was queer and it was spicy, and I thought, great, okay. So I picked it up and opened it, and it was Milk Fed by Melissa Broder. I did not realize what this book was about. I had heard of it before, and I've read The Pisces by Melissa Broder, so I knew that I was in for something quite interesting, and it definitely delivered. It does start off triggering, especially if you have a history of eating disorders, as Rachel, the main protagonist, definitely starts off very much within the grips of an eating disorder. This is very low plot but high character portrayal and growth. Now, Rachel is also Jewish and her family is very close-minded, and the person that she meets is in a very similar boat. So it's interesting to see how they come together and how they make this work. However, I felt it was very fast-paced. I felt like the character development did end up being quite a quick snap change at the end. But overall, I really did enjoy this read, and I read it quite quickly, and I gave it 3 stars. Then I picked up Watermoon by Samantha Soto Yambao. This was an audio read. This one was one that I picked up for the Herkiad Challenge, so one of the prompts is to read a new release in the month it's released. This was released in January, and it is a fantasy, romance, kind of cozy mystery, magical realism. So it's based within a pawn shop. However, this pawn shop, the storefront is a ramen store, and the only people that end up coming in to the actual pawn shop are the people that have choices that they regret, and they're able to barter these choices. What ensues is a wonderful joyride for people. Like, if you love Studio Ghibli films, this is one I highly recommend. There is so much magical realism and so much that you don't really expect, and I really enjoyed this experience, especially in audio. And you kind of question, the romance felt a little insta-lovey, I questioned that throughout the book, but the end kind of tied that up in a bow and it made more sense. And yeah, I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. Then I finished Oathbringer Part 2 by Brandon Sanderson. I am working my way through his books, especially since Wind and Truth has been released. At this stage, there's so many characters, and because I haven't been reading these all in one go, I did find there were moments where I was confused. So I end up going back and also reading Edge Dancer again later this month. Oathbringer, the last 200 pages of this book was absolutely insane. There was so much going on and I could not put it down, which is always the case with Brandon's books. This one, 4.75 stars. It was absolutely brilliant. Then I read Harrow the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. These ones are real hit and miss for me. It's not that I don't enjoy them. I thoroughly love them, but I've now finished 2 of the books via audio and I still don't really understand the full context of the story. I don't know if it's just that I'm zoning out and missing important things, but I still don't really know the exact plot and everything that happened and why. So these will definitely be a reread for me, but I do love the writing style. I think that it's one I probably need to read in hard copy or ebook. I don't think audio format works for me if I don't have the context already ingrained. I'm thinking about doing a Stormlight Archive reread via audio once I've completed the whole series, so just in one go, so that I'm able to connect the things that I haven't been able to connect this time around, because there has been spaces between me reading these books. But yeah, with this one, even though that it was sci-fi, it was queer, which is like things that I love and I usually just absolutely thoroughly enjoy, I do think these need a reread from me. However, I did give this one 3.25 stars. I thought that the bits that I understood were great. Then I read Edgedancer by Brandon Sanderson. Like I said before, this was a reread. I had actually read this before I read the Stormlight Archive. I read the entire Arcanum Unbounded short story collection. But I am really glad that I reread this because I have more context now. And I did read it a little bit out of order. It's meant to be before Oathbringer, but I wanted to finish Oathbringer first so that I could have it really fresh in my mind, because these characters from Edgedancer are introduced in Oathbringer. Really funny, really good, made me want to eat pancakes for days afterwards. I gave the reread 4 stars. Then I picked up a really funny audiobook, Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinnerman. I didn't necessarily get recommended this one, but my daughter came home from her dad's house and was talking about this audiobook that her dad was listening to and telling me all of these things about it, and I thought that is wild. That sounds like an absolute trip. So I ended up getting in contact with him and saying, what are you reading? I need to know. I need to read it immediately. And he defined it so well. He said it's a mix of World of Warcraft, The Truman Show, and Jackass. And really, that's the best explanation I could have given it. So thank you, Daniel. But this was so funny. I enjoyed this so much. This is a very funny dystopian set, sort of almost D&D setting, would also say. But basically the world has ended, the aliens have come and just demolished everything, and the only people that have survived end up having to go into this sort of real life game setting that these aliens have set up, and it is televised around the universe. So super funny, super great. I really recommend it. I gave it 4.25 stars. So funny. I instantly downloaded book 2 and it's on the radar for as soon as possible. Then I delved into the Fourth Wing series by Rebecca Yarros. I read their first book and it had every trope from every 2010 book, you know, like I saw a lot of people connect it to sort of Divergent and the Hunger Games, and I understand that, but somehow I loved this. I really enjoyed it. I knew instantly that it was going to be an enemies to lovers, and when they met, I was like, these two are going to end up together. These sort of tropes I really struggle with. I usually struggle with the enemies to lovers, so I had to kind of brush off all the negative things that this person initially said to the other person, and without giving too much away, I really enjoyed this. It was one I couldn't put down. However, I've definitely read books like this before, and if you haven't already read this, and you're not interested in anything that has sort of those 2010 tropes, then yeah, it's probably not for you. But it's a fun read. It's a fun read. And I do have the second book on hold at the library, so it could be something that I'll be reading relatively soon. I gave this one 3.75 stars. Then I finished Mistborn Era 2 by finishing The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson, and this one blew my socks off. It's you either hate it or you love it, the way that Brandon is going with these series, but this one starts connecting the Cosmere universe, which is something I've been so excited about. I've really appreciated the tiny little Easter eggs, but this one was very much more in your face, but I love it. I loved it because even though I loved the Mistborn Era 2, it definitely didn't have the same ring as Era 1. So this one, it brought more Era 1 into it, it brought more Cosmere into it, and it just made it such an enjoyable read for me. So I gave this one 4.5 stars. 2 more. So I also read The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This was such a feel-good read. I really loved this one. Even though it was kind of insta-lovey and a little bit cringy, I read this almost in one sitting. I think I read the first few pages just before going to bed, and then the next day I just demolished it. It was a lot of fun and super cute. Basically, our main protagonist, her auntie has just passed away and she has been left her home, and this home has sort of magical powers and randomly will take you 7 years into the past, but it's only within that apartment. So this apartment has been left for her in the will, and so she moves in, and this happens to her. And 7 years in the past, the auntie has hired out the apartment as a B&B, and there is this random man in her apartment when she wakes up, and it's hilarious, it's funny. I love the way it ended. I loved the interconnections between present time and past time. I really enjoyed this, but then time travel romances are my bag at the moment, so I don't know. I loved it. I gave it 4.25 stars. The last book that I read was a graphic novel. It was a graphic memoir that I picked up from the library. Eyes Too Dry, a graphic memoir about heavy feelings by Alice Chipkin and Jessica Tabasoli. This one I struggled with. I loved the context and the story, and I found it really relatable. I really connected to how they were feeling, because this covers sort of their mental health experience. But I did find the differing, so both of the authors illustrated certain sections of the book and their art styles were very, very different, which meant that confused me a little, trying to work out who was who with those different art styles, because one was quite lifelike whilst the other one was very abstract. So that I found difficult. However, I thought this was a very interesting and vital book, even for people who don't really suffer from mental health a lot, just to get a bit of an understanding of how people feel, because there was a lot of things said in this that definitely resonated with me and negative thoughts that I've had myself. And it was very nice to be able to see that, you know, there are other people going through the same sort of things and feeling the same sort of feelings. So it was good, and I gave this one 3 stars. And those are the books that I read in January. We are a few days into February. Another great month of reading, but I'll go into that in a new video very soon. So if you're new here and you happen to enjoy this video, if you've stayed till the end, thank you. And if you want to watch more from me, please feel free to subscribe. In the comments below, let me know what your favorite book was that you read in January. If you read any books that you didn't really love, did you have a good reading month? Did you have a bad reading month? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to know. So until next time, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you in a new video very, very soon. Goodbye, my darlings.